afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started with today's webinar in just another minute or two.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of NACDA's virtual programming lineup. I'm Bob Vecchione, NACDA CEO, and we are glad to have you back with us this week. Over the past several months, we all have placed an emphasis on staying healthy, both physically and mentally, as we work through these difficult times. Today's session, titled Maintaining Healthy Habits and Well-Being in the Time of Social Distancing, will help us maintain this focus. As servant leaders, each of you places a major emphasis on other people's well-being. Student athletes, coaches, family members, other administrators. What I would like to have you focus today during Dr. Feinleib's session is to introspectively think about what you are doing to stay fit and healthy during this pandemic. Leaders must lead by example, and the opportunity to take time for yourself and practice a healthier lifestyle will make a significant difference for yourself and those you lead. Our presenter this afternoon is Dr. Stephen Feinleib of the Cleveland Clinic, where he has been on staff since 2002. Dr. Feinleib currently practices in Cleveland Clinic's Executive Health Program. He's also an instructor, facilitator in relationship-centered communication for healthcare providers and is certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine. He is also a fellow of the American College of Physicians. His primary clinical interest is executive physicals, focusing on preventative medicine, health screenings, wellness coaching, cancer and heart disease risk assessment, and men's health, all guided by the principles of relationship-centered physician-patient communication. Before we begin, I would like to encourage our live attendees to ask questions throughout the session using your Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will have allotted time for these questions at the end of the presentation. There will also be an interactive poll question today, so please be ready to provide your feedback. Now, I will hand it over to Dr. Feinleib. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Bob, and thanks for inviting me. I know this is a talk to athletic directors, so I personally would like to offer a shout out to my alma maters of Maryland and Cornell, where I went to undergrad, and again, Maryland for medical school. My wife went to Michigan, so a shout out to them. And my son, who is graduating from high school this year, will be going to Northwestern. So again, another shout out to another Big Ten school. So I usually like to have this session as an interactive session. I'm usually talking about these topics with onboarding staff of the Cleveland Clinic in groups of about 30 to maybe up to 50 people. And we really interacted with our personal stories. So forgive me if I do drift into talking about physicians' life or mention that I typically ask for personal stories. And we'll do our best here to incorporate some degree of what your personal experiences are. And at least I'll talk a little bit about what I've heard either from myself or those that I've engaged in. As Bob pointed out, we all take care of others. Each of us have, whether it's perceived or real pressures of responsibility, for certain tasks or for a large or even small group of people, or even for just an individual. So what will remind ourselves of today is how we must take care of ourselves first before we can even consider taking care of other people. So far as what we hope to talk about today, we'll talk about well-being. We'll talk about what drives our well-being and its impact. We'll explore using energy as a source of our well-being and reflect a little bit more on really what we do to take care of ourselves. And then talk about what we can do to maximize energy in our work-life integration. So I want you to start with thinking to yourselves, what is well-being? Reflect on it a bit for yourself. Some may say it's good health. Others may say a calm mind. Some of you may say a peaceful existence with God, and others may say a peaceful existence with other people. Maybe financial security, or staying true to my values. To say the least, well-being is complex and involves really all of these. And when we talk about it in relationship to medicine and being a physician, well, we talk about, at least for the way it relates to work, for instance, there are many drivers, including meaning in work, our workload and job demands, our control and ability to, and our flexibility, our integration between work and our life. Or do we have a social support and community at work? Do we have an organized culture and values where we work? Do we have a sense of efficiency and resources? And when these areas are more optimal, we feel like we're engaged with a sense of vigor and dedication and absorption in what we do. And when it's less optimal, we talk about things that are involved in burnout, exhaustion, cynicism, inefficacy. And certainly this is a continuum. It's not static any given day or month or week. But look at some of these descriptors that we have when we talk about when we're engaged. Vigor, dedication, absorption. You know, it's not just what these things are related to work, but how we feel and really our energy level itself. So let's talk about that sense of how well-being is really interconnected to our level of energy and how we feel. So let's take a look at energy as this unit of how we can feel in our sense of how we interact with work, but also ourselves. And this is referring back to work by Tony Schwartz. And he actually also worked a bit with, I believe, Jim Lehrer, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and actually sports psychology. So many of you may be aware of this. When we talk about using energy as a way to fulfill ourselves. If we think about our given day, or maybe even in our career, we often say, if only I had more time. Well, guess what? Time itself is finite. And what about energy? Energy really is the capacity to do work. And the nice thing about energy is that energy is really expandable. We can change that energy as opposed to time that's finite. And what else about energy? Well, what if we have ourselves a high level of energy, or maybe even a low level of energy? How do you feel? How do you feel when the person next to you is really a downer versus someone who really brings a lot of energy to your interactions? You can see that is contagious. Energy can be felt between people. But on the other side, energy itself has to be restored. It has to be something that we can access and expand. So we can really think about our well-being along these lines of energy. We can think about our well-being in 4 really different domains if we can break it down. We can break it down to our physical energy, our physical well-being, and that includes our exercise, our sleep, our nutrition, and how we actually rest and recover in a physical way. In addition to that, we have an emotional domain where we can talk about our mood, whether or not we're engaging in maximally satisfying activities, relationships with other people that are important to us, and showing and feeling appreciation. Another domain we can consider mental, where we think about where our focus is, our self-awareness, reflection, goal setting, where our attitude is, and whether or not we have our ability to have ourselves being organized or whether we have to adapt. And finally, spiritual domain, where we can talk about our passions. Are we really looking at our own values, our integrity, our sense of purpose in what we do, both in our work and our lives and interaction with each other? So what we can do and get ready with a pen or pencil and a piece of paper is actually assess where we are. So what I'd like to do right now, think back to before the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to go through each of these domains to see how you match up to where your energy level is. We're doing essentially an audit of where your energy has been. So I want you to go ahead and count up the number of statements that are true for you more than half the time. Let's go through these. So far as your body, I get some kind of physical exercise at least 3 times a week. I get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep and wake up feeling refreshed. I eat breakfast and eat something nutritious. I take regular breaks during the day to renew and recharge, or I make an effort to step away from my desk to eat lunch, a sense of recovery. So how many of those 4 did you get? Keep that number in your head or write it down. Let's go on to the next domain though. How much of these is true for you more than half the time? Again, think back to before the COVID-19 pandemic. Back a year ago, or just even a handful of months ago. Emotions. I practice mindfulness at work to help me focus, or when I find myself feeling irritable, impatient, or anxious. I spend quality time with my family and loved ones and strive to remain present when I'm with them. I make time for the activities that I most deeply enjoy. I stop to express my appreciation to others or to savor my accomplishments and blessings. So how many of those apply to you more than half the time? Let's go on to the next domain. Mind. I am able to focus on one thing at a time, and I'm rarely distracted during the day, especially by email and texts. I focus on activities with longer-term value and high leverage, rather than spending time reacting to immediate crises and demands. I take time for reflection, strategizing, and creative thinking. I intentionally limit my work on evenings, weekends, and vacations. So how many of those apply to you more than half the time? And finally, let's go on to spirit. I spend time at work doing what I do best and enjoy most. I allocate my time and energy to what is most important to me in my life. My decisions at work are driven by a strong, clear sense of my own purpose, rather than being influenced by external demands. I invest time and energy in making a positive difference to others or the world. So how many of those 4 applied to you more than half the time before this COVID pandemic? Go ahead and add all those up. How many of those 4, those 4, those 4, those 4, and get yourself this overall number of statements checked, okay? We're gonna have a Zoom poll right now. Let's find out how we did. What was your score before the pre-COVID-19 pandemic? Did you only have 0 to 3? Did you check out 4 to 6 of these, 7 to 10 of these, or up at 11 to 16? Let's see how we're doing, or how we did before the COVID-19 pandemic. %, were in this 7 to 10 range, 39% all the way up in the 11, 16. And we'll go over in just a moment what the meaning of those are. Now, I'm also curious, before the COVID-19 pandemic, what was your highest domain? If there's a tie, pick one. But what was your highest domain? We're going to bring that up for a poll as well. There we are. So was it your physical, your body? Was it your those emotion questions? Was it your mind? Or was it your spirit? Before this COVID-19, where do you think that was your best domain? Which one scored highest for you? 51% picked physical before the pandemic. So let's go on from there. We'll think about that as we go through. Guess what? Let's take another stock in ourselves of how we've been doing since we've been staying at home. And we're going to just be looking at the same questions if they and how they apply to you over the past couple months. See if anything has changed. So first of all, your body. I get some kind of physical exercise at least 3 times a week. I get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep and wake up feeling refreshed. I eat breakfast and eat something nutritious. I take regular breaks during the day to renew and recharge, or I make an effort to step away from my desk to eat lunch. So how many of those are true for you more than half the time over the past 2 months? And then how about your emotions? I practice mindfulness at work to help me focus when I find myself feeling irritable, impatient, or anxious. I spend quality time with my family and loved ones and strive to remain present when I'm with them. I make time for the activities I most deeply enjoy. I stop to express my appreciation to others or to savor my accomplishments and blessings. How many of those ring true for you more than half the time? Again, the mind. I'm able to focus on one thing at a time, and am rarely distracted during the day, especially by email and texts. I focus on activities with longer-term value and high leverage, rather than spending time reacting to immediate crises and demands. I take time for reflection, strategizing, and creative thinking. I intentionally limit my work on evenings, weekends, and vacations. How many of those apply to you more than half the time now? And finally, spirit. I spend time at work doing what I do best and enjoy most. I allocate my time and energy to what is most important to me in my life. My decisions at work are driven by a strong, clear sense of my own purpose, rather than being influenced by external demands. And finally, I invest time and energy in making a positive difference to others or the world. How many of those apply to you now more than half the time? And go ahead and get that total number up to 16. And let's go ahead and do this poll one more time, comparing how you've been over the past couple months compared to where you were before the COVID pandemic. As you recall, we had about, I think 50% were in the 7 to 10 range, or at least 40%, and maybe another 40% in the 11 to 16 range. And now, maybe a little bit more, maybe a few more in the 11 to 16 range. And so thankfully, very few of us down in the low range, but there are some. Let's go ahead and look again at what our highest domain is. In the past couple months, what is your highest domain? Physical body, emotions, mind, or spirit? Which was the highest domain for you in the past couple months? So as we look at this and compare it to where it was before, I believe majority were in the physical and body, and even higher so now. Still about 10 to 20% emotion, mind, spirit. So what is this looking at? If we can label these, you can see that up in the 11 to 16 range is looking that you are in optimal energizing activities. You are fully energized. Reasonable if you're in the 7 to 10 range. Opportunities if you're down in the 4 to 6 range, and maybe even in an energy crisis if you are in the 0 to 3 range. But guess what? Again, we have an opportunity to be able to look back at ourselves and maybe even learn from each other. Again, at this point, we try to extract from people what their individual stories are. So we'll start thinking about what it is for yourself. What was your highest score? In what domain? Did it change for you? What are the specific practices and behaviors that you are doing to build your energy and your well-being within any given domain? So let's go through each of these domains one by one, and we can think about to yourselves. If you want to put it on the chat or questions, you can start commenting in there. And otherwise, I'll try to share some of the experiences, again, that I've been able to focus on, or lack thereof, and also maybe share some other stories of what I've heard. So what practices specifically do we do for our physical and body area? What are we doing for maintaining a regular exercise routine? What are we doing to maintain and have refreshing sleep and nutrition and recovery? What are some of the things that you've tapped into over the past couple months or in the past? Was there a time in your life when things weren't going so well so far as your physical activity, and then something clicked, something changed for you? What was it that worked? That's what we're hoping to find out. Many people, at least recently, they've utilized an at-home workout using videos or live stream, or some things that you've done over the past couple months. Maybe you started running or biking, making sure to keep your distance. My wife and her friends, they run. One is on the sidewalk, the other is in the street. Able to keep the distance, but run together. Maybe you like to compete with friends. There are lots of apps out there where we can compare what our bike rides are, our runs are. My son joined a national group and looked at goals, and they had people competing in a friendly way. Great, thank you. Working out as a family, an outdoor gym, fantastic. How about our sleep? What have you done to actually be able to focus on sleep? Has it been important for you, or have you been able to say, oh, I'll sleep after I retire? There's no question that we have found that sleep makes us much more efficient at work. So what have we done to actually help our sleep? So many apps are out there now. There's so many focus, and I hope that you've been able to look at those so far as being able to go through relaxation techniques, spending time an hour before bed just to wind things down and get into a routine. I've had onboarding staff say, oh, what I do is actually I set an alarm of when it's time to go to bed, when to start that hour of winding down. Just like I set a waking up alarm, I have a going to bed alarm of when to remind myself when to start that process. Alcohol. How many people have actually been drinking more, and others, how many have been drinking less? And they've noticed that, wow, making alcohol, I thought it really helped me sleep. It put me to sleep, but boy, throughout the night, I really found that I was waking up in the middle of the night and very restless. It's so common. Alcohol is actually a sedative, so it actually helps you fall asleep. But when it leaves your system, it activates you. It releases that almost like a mini withdrawal a few hours later. And so alcohol can really affect our sleep in a deleterious way. Some people have been intentionally going to sleep an hour earlier. Nutrition. Cooking your own food more recently. Choosing out those healthier options. Eating out less. One thing I've already talked to some patients who started to come back in since the pandemic have said, I'm not traveling as much. I'm not traveling as much for work, so I'm not eating out as much. And I've lost 10, 15 pounds just by doing that. So many people have pointed out there are numerous apps, smartphone apps, that we can look to for following our calorie intake, what our nutrients are, multiple commercial as well as free apps for that. I've had a lot of people share their recipes in the small community groups or on their Zoom networking. What are some things that you've been able to focus on for your nutrition? Do you have scheduled downtime to recharge? Are there times at the end of the workday before going home, we're spending 10 minutes of settling down before I go home to work, to go home to be with my family? Or do I spend actually that time in the car? Do I listen to a podcast as we're going home? A lot of people have been really paying attention to nutrition labels. A challenge at the gym requiring logging. Well, guess what? That's the point I wanted to point out, is that keeping a routine is true for all of these. The keeping of the routine is really is the most helpful to really fulfill what our goals are for exercise, our sleep, our nutrition, our recovery. Where do you and how do you establish that routine? And I would be remiss if I didn't mention what I actually do in my day job, which is talking about regular visits with physicians, or perhaps even an executive physical, as Bob alluded to here at the Cleveland Clinic, and I'm sure probably at many institutions that many of you are affiliated with, have actually more extensive physical than maybe what you get with your primary care provider. Well, maybe your primary care provider really helps you to take advantage of some of these practices. And really, let me emphasize that. Why? Why is it necessary, or why would I feel any kind of incentive to see a provider on a regular basis? I feel like I'm fine. I think I know what I'm doing. I'm meeting whatever requirements there are for my discount, for my insurance. But what are we doing at these regular visits? We work to help you screen for chronic disease or early indicators of chronic disease, and to maybe help reinforce what your healthy habits are. So what's the importance of chronic disease prevention? Well, longevity, or some people call it real age, is linked to delaying the onset of chronic disease rather than treating it after it is already diagnosed. No matter how well we treat, for instance, diabetes or blood pressure, or cholesterol, say medication, or even reactively with our lifestyle habits, delaying the onset of these is so much more effective than even treating things well. And COVID-19, well, this has certainly been a glaring example of how people with chronic disease, be it high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, can be affected so much more than those without a. From the CDC, the week ending May 9th, so this is the most recent evidence data that we have, that among almost 4,000 hospitalized patients where information about underlying medical conditions was available, 92% had some sort of underlying health condition, and only 8% had no underlying medical condition at all. What were the top medical conditions which really contributed to, well, not necessarily contributed, but people had that were hospitalized patients with COVID-19. They had high blood pressure, they had obesity, and we're just looking at the blue lines here, obesity, other metabolic disease, which includes diabetes, and all those more so than cardiovascular disease, lung disease, asthma, etc. Again, avoiding these altogether may be associated with prevention of serious outcomes, of bad outcomes when it comes to other diseases like COVID-19. Let's move on to another domain, our emotions. What are you doing to help with mindfulness? Focusing on how you're establishing relationships, your most enjoyable activities, and being able to express or feel appreciation. Well, first of all, what's mindfulness? What does that mean to you? Many people might think, oh, well, it's my ability to refocus, to really set my mind on being able to relax. Well, mindfulness itself is actually just that notion of being able to acknowledge what is going on without judgment. It's your ability to just understand and realize what it is that's affecting you. That's the first step that you need to do in order to be able to make change. Without judgment, without self-criticism. It's being able to step back behind this waterfall of things that would otherwise be coming and falling on you, and able to step back and just observe it. Once you have that acknowledgement, that recognition, then what can we do? What are certain things that you can do even in the moment? Just taking a few deep breaths to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, that part that opposes adrenaline to help us relax. That we can start to feel a relaxation, maybe in our jaw, our temples, our shoulders. Mindful moments. What are some things I can do in just a minute or so to have a go-to image that will help me relax? It's this dedicated practice to make it easily accessible for ourselves throughout the day, in the evening when we're trying to go to bed at night, or at other times when we otherwise might feel stressed. Do we have a go-to that we have practiced and know how to use in the times that we need it? It's probably things that are familiar to you if you've been a coach, and how you relate that to players. What are the things that you can go to and step back? What are some things that you can do instead of don't do? Come on, just relax. Don't get all tensed up there, but rather do relax your shoulders. Pull your scapula down and relaxing the shoulders. Loosen the jaw just a little bit. So things to do rather than thinking about things not to do. Do we spend moments with our family and friends? So many of us, I have, reconnected with some friends from college or big family get-togethers that we otherwise wouldn't have had this opportunity. A silver lining maybe from this moment that we can't physically be with others is that we can tap into some other resources. Maybe you developed the simple, gone back to certain hobbies. Maybe you said, oh, well, look, I have a chance to refocus. I have a chance to go back and tap into certain things that I really found rewarding. What are some things that you've been able to do? And finally, have you taken a moment to really express appreciation to those that you love, or maybe just the ones who are around you? Maybe it's just a simple thank you when, unfortunately, we may not be able to show our smile to someone who brings us a delivery for food, other people who are walking even next to us. It's giving a nod. It's giving a smile with our eyes. Or maybe it's even for ourselves. Maybe it's writing down 2 or 3 things each night that I'm grateful for. Or a moment before dinner starts, when you're sitting down to dinner with some others that you love. A staff who was onboarding recently said, before we even start dinner, my wife and I say one good thing that happened that day. How about your mind? What do you do specifically to focus on certain aspects of your mind, specifically organization, goal setting, reflection, limit setting? We know that we try to multitask, we are much less efficient than if we were to really set moments in our day to say, this is the time that I'm going to work on my email. For me, for instance, this is my time that I'm going to work on looking over results from laboratory tests from my patients. This is the time that I'm going to focus on calling up patients. This is a time that I am going to be with my patient in an exam room. It's not the time that I'm going to start thinking about what the next patient or the previous patient, but rather the focus of who's in front of me. By dedicating specific time, then we're able to be more efficient. If we get distracted, we think, oh, I can get right back into where I was. It actually takes even up to 20 minutes or maybe even longer before we get back to the efficiency as if we didn't take a break at all. Some people have talked about, well, once a month, I'm just going to spend an afternoon, several hours to figure out what are my goals? Where am I going along those lines? What is some time for self-reflection? Just an afternoon per month. Am I setting limits? No cell phones at the dinner table. Am I setting clear expectations for when other people can expect return emails from me? Finally, what do you do for spirit? What do you do to help to really tap into those aspects of passion, your values, your purpose, your integrity? Where do you start even? Maybe for many of you, it's actually stepping into something that you almost had forgotten what you enjoy so much. Maybe it's, for instance, interacting with students. Maybe it's a teaching, a coaching, just stepping in every so often of things that really make you feel re-energized. Maybe so far as streaming religious services over those past couple months. Is that something that's helped you recenter? Maybe even stepping back and what is my vision statement? What does it mean for me so far as what I really am all about? Personally, it might be something like, well, I really want to make sure that I'm helping people be where they want to be. Whether that's helping them through their health or really just being able to help them figure out what it is that they want to be in their life. Helping them live the best life that they can. Maybe you have someone that you have tapped into in the past and you can put that coaching or mentor mind into your mind. Remember these couple of sentences that they made or phrases that they have said to you in the past. In this situation, what would my mentor or coach do? Volunteerism is another thing that really helps us get back to where we can identify with a certain purpose and integrity. Giving and volunteering is one of the more important aspects of habits we can do to help avoid burnout, actually. So those are just a few of examples I've heard, maybe even engaged in, to help tap into each of these well-being domains. Maybe it is time for a change. Maybe there's actually just one little thing, one little behavior that you would like to think about and tap into. Start by thinking about your goals, your motivation, your values. What are some of the options? What are some of the plans that you can do? If if you choose one thing that we talked about to help you work on that energy and maybe get one more point in that audit. Now, when we talk about that, we'd like to focus, well, you tend to focus on problems, especially, as physicians, we definitely tend to focus on problems. Maybe as coaches, some people had a tendency to focus on problems, but what actually happens when we focus on problems? We find more problems, and we think about the bad things that happened in the past, and we think about things that we have to do, things that we must do, things that we should be doing. That's pretty burdensome. That is really a weight on the back of our shoulders. But when we start thinking about the possibilities, when we start thinking about our goal, when we start focusing on what we have done successfully in the past, that's when we tap into what's enlightening and literally lightening our load off of our back and feeling like, oh, that's where I want to be. That's exciting to think about. So instead of thinking and being reactive to things that we had problems, and we focus on limitations and mistakes and causes, we really think about the past. Well, instead, we can be proactive and think about where we do want to be. We can focus on our strengths. And then, yes, we can think about our barriers, but with bridges. And we can start making the impossible possible and thinking about the future. And that's what gets us excited about what we'd like to do. So we can even tap back into this idea that it's not only focusing on what is happening to us. Oh, well, I have this thing to do and that thing to do. I was told to do this. I have this to worry about and that to worry about. Well, we can start to think about things along not just those issues that will always be there, but what we can do. The one thing that we can do is change how we react to them. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Holocaust, said everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way, so that we do not have to only focus on what is a problem and then tend to gravitate towards the train wreck, or we can think about possibilities and you will have more possibilities. So I'm sure a lot of you have thought about this in coaching or talking to other people as one example of thinking about when we were at our best. Imagining that. Think of a time that you're at your best. Is it a time in your career? Is it a time that you passed a certain exam? Is it a time in a sports career where something heroic happened? Or even just a whole team effort that happened? Sometimes I even tap into a time when I was, for instance, practicing yoga on a very regular basis. Since then, I've done some other exercise as well. But there was a time that I was practicing yoga like 3 times a week and really engaged in the yoga instructor and the type of classes. I was able to just close my eyes and just flow through the whole class and feeling very strong in certain positions and being able to relax all these other muscles in my body while emphasizing the muscles that I wanted to use for that. That even was a simple example of a time that I felt like I was at my best. I could feel the energy flowing from other people. Not only that, but the energy that was flowing from me to other people. That was a way that I could feel, and I'm sure maybe you felt, that what we do with our mind affects our body. And not only that, but how that sense of accomplishment and feeling excited about things, how that becomes infectious. How you may have felt that. We know that these same areas of our brain that light up within ourselves when we experience an exciting episode in our lives, if we can just think about those times, we can activate those same sensors. And guess what? even a person listening to that story can hear that same thing. That's why I'm sure that you are all familiar with motivational speeches by coaches, etc. That's where it gets all infectious and really inspiring. Not only what the vision is, but what the actual vision, what that vision means and does for us. That opens our minds, expands our options if we have that positive approach to it. So think about what goals you have. Think about, again, maybe one of those little things. Maybe it is a small goal that we can say, okay, well, let's be very specific about that. Let's try to be able to think about how we can measure when we get to this goal. Is it achievable? Is it relevant? Is it time bound? I'm sure you've heard of these. So for instance, personally, what if, I want to figure out a way to continue to spend valuable time with my children. So maybe make that my big goal. But more specifically, maybe I can make that, I want to exercise with my children. Or more directly, maybe, okay, let's pick out one thing. I want to run with my child. Now he goes a lot faster than I can, but I can't keep up. Well, maybe I can do something to help with actually maybe just being able to keep up with him in maybe a race that will be for charity. Oh, wait a second. I just tapped into a couple of different things there in our goals and our domains, right? Well, I don't like running. I like biking, but the weather's been, not all that great over the past couple of months, and so I wasn't able to get on my bike. But guess what? I say, all right, I'm going to have a goal to run a 5K, maybe a 7K, 7.5K with my son. Well, when? How about by this August? Well, to do this, I have to start somewhat slowly. Well, I'll start walking a 5K. Maybe I'll start walking a 2K. And then when will you do this? Well, I can do it starting tomorrow. That's okay. How much time do we need? I need 30 minutes. Well, I'm looking forward to that 30 minutes because I know that I will be able to use that to spend time with my children. Instead of that need to, it's I want to. I'm looking forward to spending more time with my children and being active. I'm looking forward to that 30 minutes of walking, maybe even jogging. Well, what will I need to do that? Oh, I need shoes that fit. Well, where? Oh, I can get it on Amazon or a local shoe store. When are we going to do it? Oh, I'll do it right now. How confident do you think that you'll be able to run a 5K by 4 weeks from now? Oh, no, run it efficiently, maybe 50, 60, 70%. Well, why do you say that in zero as opposed to 0%? Well, because I've done it before. I know where to get the right shoes. I'm looking forward to making my children happy. I know how I will feel when I'm able to do this. And I do what I promise. So I'm pretty darn confident that I'll be able to do that. Well, guess what? In the past 2 months, I did start running a little bit. And initially it was around 10 and a half minutes a mile. I kept on doing it. And look, over those 2 months, look at that time has gone down and down and down. And do I feel better? You betcha. My son, he's so impressed. He actually made this chart for me. These are the things that we can do on just a little bit of time, and more importantly, with energy, to focus on the things that we can do, the things that we've been successful at in the past, and be able to focus on ourselves before we can focus on all the other people that we care for. So on that note, I want to thank you. I want to have you feel free to share some of your experiences, ask any questions, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Feinleib. I think the tips that you shared were certainly relevant for our membership, no matter if we have ADs, current ADs, all the way down to, students and GAs that were in attendance today. So we appreciate all of your insight in this area. I think one of the things, we talked a lot over the last several weeks in some of our other sessions about controlling what you can in this time of uncertainty. I think that was also an underlying theme in your talk today. What advice or tactics can you give the leaders on the call today? You know, everyone's kind of looking forward to the next several weeks as states are beginning to reopen, and the possibility of going back to campus and seeing our staffs and our coaches and some students again, with making improvements to our domains that you talked about in the beginning, making improvements on those while we've been staying at home. How do we avoid sort of a shock to the system as we maybe are thrown back into our quote unquote normal schedules, and still maintain some of these healthy habits that we've gotten a little bit better at over the last couple weeks and months?
All right, fantastic question, because a lot of us, again, will start resorting back to that, oh, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time now. And maybe just think about that will remind us that, well, it's not the time, it's those efforts that make a difference. It's those little moments of restoring our energy that can go a long way in just a handful of moments. Maybe it's getting a grip on a regular schedule. It's starting from one spot in this cycle and seeing how it will influence the other. So for instance, it might be, well, as long as I focus on a specific bedtime and when I'm going to go to sleep and being able to have an efficient sleep, well then, with that, that'll come back around to the morning. That'll come around to the morning when I wake up refreshed. And maybe then I'll be able to have a regular schedule in the morning to, for instance, do a moments of exercise, whether it's not necessarily an hour every day that's going to be most efficient, but rather, oh, it's actually doing a certain amount of strength exercises on focusing on the big muscle groups 2 or 3 times a week. Or another day, is it going for half an hour or 20 minutes of a brisk walk, and realizing I don't have to do all of it at once. Then how does that affect how we feel in the morning? How do we feel in the mornings as far as our engagement and having a breakfast and maybe engaging with our family? And then how does that translate into work, for instance, and saying, wow, all of a sudden I have all this more energy. I'm so much more efficient at work. My energy becomes infectious. And then all the people around me, it becomes much more pleasant more pleasant environment and support for each other. And suddenly work is not burdensome or distracting. It becomes a reward in and of itself. And then it cycles back around to the evening when, oh, I'm looking forward to sharing something along those lines with my family. And I'm able to settle back down later in the evening for sleep. So it's that cycle. It's if I start at one moment, then that'll translate to how it works throughout the rest of the day.
For those of us that maybe aren't rushing back to campus then yet just right away, how does that advice translate to those of us who are still operating virtually? If that's all we have for right now and the foreseeable future, you know, these leaders, they want their staff to feel connected and appreciated and not just driven to work constantly because their schedules are a little bit different.
Yeah, great question. And a lot of that goes back to one of those domains of, for instance, of appreciation. Maybe it's a matter of, we talked about saying one good thing at the beginning of dinner. Well, maybe it's 1 or 2 good things at the beginning of work. Being able for time to appreciate each other of those that they've worked together, or say, hey, what did you do this weekend? Tell us one good thing that happened to you this weekend, or one great thing that happened to a family member, or one thing that you're looking forward to. So starting that positive type of talk can really generate the interaction of being able to connect with one another, being able to connect with one another, not just on a work basis, but also on a personal basis. And then, hey, maybe you might learn something. Maybe you might learn something about a strength that someone had personally, and maybe even capitalize on that at work and say, wait a second, this person is really excellent at doing this type of task versus that type of task. Now I get to know them a little bit better and being able to use my team in a more efficient way rather than using my team in all the same way and not realizing that this person is a role player because they have these strengths that they brought from their experiences at home. And tapping into some positive emotions at the beginning of a meeting or some sharing some of those positive experiences can really help with what the goals are rather than settling and focusing on the barriers and problems. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, absolutely. How can, as we're sharing these tactics, we talked about the importance of taking care of yourself first, so you can take care of others. But when we do, use this time to then have the trickle down effect, right, and take care of everybody else on our staff, including our students, how do we express this to our coaches, in a meaningful, useful way so that they can, it kind of goes down the tree so they can share with their staffs and their students? Do you see that being different by, the size of the institution or the sport that's available, maybe?
Oh, there's no question that a tree becomes big very quickly. I firmly believe that leading by example is the most important thing that one can do. We have a lot of executives come through our program, and that's really what we like to tap into, is the fact that maybe if we can talk about some, again, these well-being habits for themselves, then others will see the same thing. For instance, if we say things like, oh, it's really important for us for you to go home and be with your family, go ahead, definitely leave work at 5 or 6, we want you to be home with your family. Don't worry, I'll stay here and I'll take care of it. I'll work late. Well, what kind of a message does that show? What message that shows is that if you want to get somewhere, then you have to be the one there to work late and not go home or be with your family. Well, maybe it's the other way around, that we should really lead by example. No, let's all of us set these limits for ourselves, including those who are, say, an administrative level. Let's all lead by example. Let's all express our goals of where we want to be and why that is so exciting, and making that infectious to those that are directly work with us. And then that, and leading by example, can help. And I'm sure there are many other ways that you guys can tap into as well. I hope that was helpful too.
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the things working in college athletics, no matter what area of the department you're in, we're constantly feeling like we have to do it all, that everything has to get done, and there's nothing, that can ever be pushed to the wayside. So when we're talking about improving our health and our healthy habits like this, you mentioned, time is finite and that doesn't change. So when we get to a point where we feel like we have to choose one thing or the other, how do we prioritize the sacrifices we have to make? You touched on it a little bit, like saying, do I get an extra hour of sleep, or do I wake up and work out? Or do I, meal prep for the week, or do I spend that time with my kids? How do we, when we get to that fork in the road, where do we know, how do we know where to go?
Right. So that's a great question too, and great examples. And I think you actually tapped into some things that can be actually blended together. For instance, if it's meal prep, maybe the kids are actually joining in the meal prep or in the same room. And they, again, is it something that you want to share with those of us who do have skills, those skills that we have in the kitchen, for instance, and be able to share it with our kids for their future. Again, making it fun for each of you, and maybe even with exercise as well. Playing with our kids is a great form of exercise and keeps us limber as well. Just a couple of examples of how we can combine things. And we can also realize that how one thing can affect another. The fact that we do get good sleep allows us to be able to wake up fresh in the morning. And that exercise that we do gives us more energy throughout the day. And it doesn't have to be one or the other, but rather one affects the other. And I think it actually goes back to a little bit about our thoughts in athletics of, well, first of all, that positive visualization is a great thing that is used in athletics. But other thing is, well, think about the team concept. Think about, wait a second, one player does not do it all. It's not possible to do it all. And that's really a recipe for failure. But rather, we know that different players have different skills that can be capitalized to really make the whole team. And being able to realize that your role on the team is for the greater good of the success of the team. And even though one person may not get the perceived glory, that the whole success of the team is really where the glory is. And so we can think about that for ourselves as well. Well, maybe I don't have to do all of this myself. I have people who work with me who can help me with that. I have family members who can do that with me. Or if it's myself, what are some other things I can do that combine the strengths that I have to help the areas that are weak and make those stronger and make the whole picture better.
That's great. I think that was a great note to end on, but if there's a closing statement that you want to leave our members with today after this presentation, Dr. Feinleib?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that really was the really a great way to tap into the fact that if we can imagine where we want to be, that's where we get this positive inspiration of not feeling like it's a burden to do certain things, but really being able to focus on the end product, and then that makes it exciting to do the things to get there.
Great. Thank you so much again from the NACDA team. Thank you to Dr. Feinleib for his time and expertise today, and to all of our attendees. We hope to see you online again soon. Take care, everybody.